Welcome, Apoorv, to Buyside Hippies. How are you doing, Apoorv?
Hey, all good. How are you? Thank you for
I-
inviting me over. Right.
I'm doing well, and good to know you're keeping safe. Currently, putting up in Bay Area in States. So just to introduce Apoorv, he is an Harvard MBA, ex-Omidyar investor, ex-ITC operations, and currently will be joining Insights Partners, which is one of the biggest tech private equity funds in the world. So Apoorv, let's get started with this, and I'm really excited to have you here. Apoorv, before I start decoding your journey on this podcast and the decisions you made and why you made them. I'll ask you a more like a sort of philosophical question just to understand you as a person. You know, you have achieved so much in life. People can only dream of. But I just want to understand, Apur, what motivates you in life? What inspires you to do things the way you do things? If you can provide some perspective.
Awesome. Yeah. One, I honestly don't think I've achieved a lot. I think what I have done in general is how people perceive a success, but there's different ways. You can have success, and there's a long way still ahead of me. I'm still very young and fairly young in that way. So I think it's just very early part of my journey in that way. But yeah, to answer your question, in what drives me is perhaps that there is still a long way to go, and how in any and everything that I do, I can kind of
Yeah.
put in my best and 100%, and leave it to how the course takes its own way. I've kind of seen wherever I've worked and whatever I've done, I've tried to just put in my best efforts, be honest to my work, um, and with time also learned to have ambitions and be visionary in a way that you kind of set some goals to where and how you would want yourself to see in 50 years. What are the things that you would want to achieve? How would you want to kind of positively impact the world in any small way that you can? And I think having that sight and just being honest and kind of continuously working towards that goal is something I think which keeps me ticking.
No, thanks for just letting me know, because you know a lot of people who work for say a McKinsey or a Blackstones, you know, of the world. People think that they make a lot of money, and people usually correlate, you know, like money with indirectly buying whatever you want to buy, which leads to you being more happy. At least that's the sort of narrative people play in their minds. But that is why I just asked just to understand, you and maybe if you can just tell me what makes you happy, Apoorv. Is there something in particular you're looking for from your career, from your life?
I think the first and foremost, I think what makes me happy is kind of just seeing my loved ones being happy in general. I
Hmm.
think I started as a young, ambitious kid where a lot of my happiness was professional success. But somewhere down the line, I was underplaying personal success. But I think with the function of a great boss, some great mentors along the way, both professionally and personally, I think I've realized that for me at least, some people actually take profession happiness from professional success, and it's not like it doesn't matter to me, but like the first and the foremost thing is, I would want to do things where I'm keeping my loved ones happy, bringing a smile towards them, and that automatically, keeps me satisfied and happy at one end. And apart from that, purely on professional end, from a career perspective, what makes me happy, I think I see it more from a bit-sized way as opposed to like a long-term happiness goal that, hey, there is a 10-year goal I've set for myself, and only to
Yeah.
achieve is what is happiness. At least what keeps me going in that way is, there are these bit-sized targets every, half a day that you set for yourself. And if you're able to kind of, do well on those things, that kind of gives me immense happiness that, I put a target to myself, I was able to do it. It was a difficult task, let's move on to the other. And that happiness kind of propels me to the next day in a certain way. So I think just that honesty that, hey, I was honest in my assessment of putting myself a certain task and being able
Hmm.
to achieve that on a daily basis is something I think makes me happy at the end of the day. And I remember there are days where I've kind of laxed, not actually done or followed on the goals that I'd set for myself. And it helps me reflect back then and be like, am I doing justice? Am I setting the right goals for myself? And all of that. And I think that helps me kind of be more reflective also, because then your happiness and your reflection are correlated on those days. Then you're able to kind of continuously iterate and grow on your overall journey.
Right. So, if you don't mind me asking, is this approach of bit-sized micro goals, day-to-day achieving of goals, is something you have come up with over your journey when you worked across in your IT Delhi days, or this is something you've been doing since the very beginning?
I think it naturally came to me. I maybe I've learned it from my mother, or I've observed and kind of ingrained in myself through my surroundings and different people that I've seen. But also, I think over time, I've also seen. So, if you talk to a lot of my friends who knew me from my undergrad days, I was an ambitious kid. I used to have lofty goals and I used to speak them out. But I honestly have never seen, those 5 years, or like 5 year goals or 10-year goals play out the way, like what I wanted to be 5 years, when I entered college is not what I wanted to be when I was graduating from there.
Right,
Uh,
right, right.
I think over time, and I'm somebody who reflects a lot on these things and tries and learn from it, I realize that, it's very difficult to guess what's 5 year ahead of you or 10 year ahead of you in general. And therefore, just that practice of having micro goals and being just aware and thoughtful and reflective of how and where your journey is going, and making those, micro decisions and having those micro goals, perhaps have led me to the right places at the right time and all of that, and have allowed me to make the best use of those opportunities that I have at that point of time. And that in some
Hmm.
way is fine, because that, hey, at this point of time, these are 5 things that I could have done. I was deliberate about it, chose my chose one of the things that I thought was best, and then put in my 100% effort towards it.
Got it. Got it. No, very interesting insight, because I know a lot of people, when they see a lofty goal, the journey seems too daunting just to even start up with. And, since you've now told your approach, I'm sure a lot of viewers who will see this will take some inspiration. At least I hope they do from you. So, Purv, I'll just sort of ask you my sort of a pre-Omidyar question. That you started your career after IIT Delhi in operations. Yippee and Bingo were like one of the household names. And I think when you were overseeing that sort of the manufacturing. So tell us, how good, say, was that a starting point in your career?
Yeah. No, so sorry. First it was IT Kanpur.
Oh,
uh,
sorry. Yeah.
it's Kanpur, but uh, so I think I still think I was super super lucky that I kind of got chance to work with ITC. And also ITC is a large conglomerate. Like, they hire around 60 people a year from different IITs and NITs,
Wow.
and IIMs. If that's the number, I'm right, and they kind of place it into different businesses. Uh, and so I think for me, definitely a large part of, you know my learnings and my fast track uh, growth as an individual was so much a function of my starting years at ITC, that I got a chance to work within what was a division called foods. It was, unlike a tobacco, a very fast growing and a very entrepreneurial division. Like, tobacco is a very mature business. ITC is one of the dominant players.
Yeah.
The systems are set in place and all of that. Whereas in foods, you're trying to kind of, get into new businesses, take on, established players like a Nestle or a Unilever or a Britannia, for example, and kind of break into some of their larger categories. Um, and so for us, that was like a very entrepreneurial, fast growing ecosystem. And I remember starting with like a 4 month stint across, sales, manufacturing, uh, procurement, supply chain, a lot of those aspects of it, which was like a first time understanding of how you even get your chips or Maggie is just not that simple. There is a long process, and you therefore have a better appreciation of efficiencies and inefficiencies in the whole ecosystem. But I would say what was game changing for me is ITC is one of the very few companies I must credit which doesn't shy away from like putting you into like a swimming pool, and they ask you to kind of figure out the situation and learn to swim. So I remember like my first posting was in one of their factories in Pune, which obviously was at that point of time going through their own set of issues. And when my role suddenly was, hey, just go in there, rectify the situation, manage a team of like a large unionized workforce, and so manage HR issues, manage production issues, get in place the maintenance stuff. So it was like suddenly, as a 22-year-old young kid, you're supposed to lead a large team, and in factory typically, as a production head, you're like the second senior most or third senior most person in the factory, and so these are like workers who are 40 years old, 45 years old, who perhaps a lot of them don't even speak Hindi, know Marathi, and you have to kind of lead them, communicate with them, empathize with them, and that's where I think I kind of grew into what leadership is. And also, once you're put into that position, your actions dictate on how a lot of like factory performs in a certain way, and I think that for me was a game changer because I suddenly transformed into a more responsible individual because I knew my actions bore a lot of consequences for the overall business, and at least how workers would perceive me and how therefore they would act. And I think so, helping that factory become one of the, good performing factories in the ITC system. And then again, I kind of got lucky that there was a vacancy where I was, fast tracked into the headquarters and given
Okay.
the responsibility for managing, and coordinating the overall end-to-end, manufacturing operations, under the head of operations for, the snacks, noodles, and pasta business. So I kind of working on a very micro business to a macro business, got a chance to kind of work across, perhaps what some 14, 15 factories at that point of time, set up new factories, drive greenfield expansions.
Yeah.
We
Right.
got to the Maggie crisis at that point of time. It was during my time only there, where the entire Maggie recall happened, and Yippee was one of the very few brands which was on the shelf. And
Right.
managing that itself was like a crash course in like general management. So yeah, I would like definitely credit ITC in helping me learn what leadership means. Having even get the fundamental 101 of like what business is across from an all sectoral perspective, because people generally tend to have like one functional perspective. I kind of got to see how decisions are made from a PNL basis. So how do you think about marketing, finance, supply chain operations, and all of that, which was a pretty a useful stint that I would always thank ITC for.
Right, right. There are very few people I've seen in the investing world who actually have an operations background. Most of them come from consulting or investment banking, and then they sort of move into this position. But it's a pretty interesting and great background, which I'm sure you've leveraged later in your life to get amazing opportunities for yourself. But Apur, if you had such a great job and you were enjoying it and you were learning so much, what made you say look out for other opportunities outside ITC?
Yeah. So I would say broader things. 2.5 years for me, I kind of got both the micro and the macro exposure. And so I think as somebody who reflects a lot, I thought, this is a changing world. Technology is playing a huge role. And, there's a lot of activity happening at that point of time around 2016, that like, end of 2016, 17, the ecosystem was opening up, so if you want to learn and be aligned to where the next 100 years is, technology is like something you definitely want to, further understand better and have a play in. And so I was like at this early stage of my career, having learned the fundamentals of 101, like the 101 of a business, why
Yep.
not kind of add to your repertoire of skills in general and kind of expand your horizon on how you understand businesses and especially technology as a sector. And so I thought like, engaging with startups and, um, kind of talking to entrepreneurs would be like a very interesting theme and idea to pursue. And at the same time, I think I was in touch with a lot of my batchmates who were starting up. I was the head of entrepreneurship cell at my time at IIT Kanpur.
Okay. Okay.
My batchmates only started, share chat, for example. There
Wow.
was one of my junior ESL coordinator, Rafish, who started working with Able Jobs, the CEO of Able Jobs. So there are a ton of people who built amazing startups. Batchmates started OK Credit. There's a bunch of amazing people who
Wow.
started amazing startups from IIT Kanpur. And so, you were in touch with some of these folks, got to discuss and saw like they're very interesting problems. So I thought, this might be an interesting play to have. And also at the same time, I was also kind of inspired by kind of just not thinking about commercial profit, but kind of marrying that concept of technology and investing with impact, and that's how I was kind of starting to only look at like impact investing roles, or roles where pure commercial investing roles where you get to invest in problems like energy or sustainability problems at that point of time. And that was the reason I started to go back.
Got it, got it. So, can you just, like, for the benefit of the audience, tell us how did you switch from ITC to Omidyar? Omidyar is supposed to be one of the most respected impact funds in the world. How did this opportunity come by?
Yeah. No, I was just lucky at the right place at the right time. No great insight that I would have on this is like as soon as I started looking out, I knew somebody in my common network. I saw a post on Facebook saying that this role has opened up at Omidyar. Does somebody want to explore that? I messaged that person, had a chat. That person forwarded me, and obviously everybody thought that I didn't stand a chance, and I also similarly thought that I didn't stand a chance because consulting and IBs are like a typical like a
Path.
standard
Uh,
for how investment analysts are hired at that point of time.
yep.
So yeah, but I think grateful to Omidyar and grateful to the partner at that point of time who's hiring me, Mr. Madhukar, who's been like an amazing mentor to me since then, who kind of appreciated the insights that I could bring, from my operations background, uh, and kind of could see through more than immediate consulting knowledge or immediate ability to kind of just make uh, have a broader strategic sense and kind of see like the different value adds that I could bring and the diversity that I could add to the team at that point of time. There mostly had folks from consulting, and so like I was one of the first few hires who were kind of brought in from an operating background, and the broader team at Omidyar was pretty supportive of it. So they took a bet on me, and I hope it worked out for them.
You know, as I mentioned before, that there aren't a lot of operating folks in the investing world. But I think that is something that becomes one of your great assets as you sort of, I think, progress, because you understand the supply chain, which takes years to understand. You can't just come up like one day, just try to understand everything and you learn it up. I think the only other person I sort of know is a guy, Mayank. He works in Sequoia. Only he's the guy who I've actually seen, who has this operating background, apart from you, Apoorv. So it's great to know. And Apoorv, like, I've
Sorry,
noticed that.
there was a lot of folks now, at least I think investing firms in India have opened up to the ideas. There are a lot of folks now getting hired to like work with startups or were in like chief of staff role or were
Right,
found.
right, right.
So I'm glad the ecosystem is opening up to such people. And like yeah, I definitely see a lot of value add of like having people who've been in operations and how at least founders can relate to them and how you can empathize with their problems. And
Right, right. So I just wanted to bring it out that Omidyar, unlike other sort of Sandhill Road VCs like Axel or I don't know A16Z, it's not the same. It's more into impact investments and grants, as well as sort of their model. Can you please help me understand what was your role like in Omidyar, and why is Omidyar so coveted in the finance world?
I think one, I think they have been the pioneers of kind of having, even shape the thinking around the whole impact investing movement. Like I would say some of these early firms like Sequoia shaped, what venture capital globally looked like back in the 70s and 80s and 90s.
Yep.
I think Omidyar, along with few others, have kind of done an amazing job of kind of defining how should you be even thinking about impact investing. I think a lot of people globally used to start thinking that if it's impact investment, you are not making money on it. So it's like give a do an investment where it's more like a grant. You don't think about it, or perhaps you're making investment where you perhaps will be making subpar returns in general. And I think for example, Avishkar in India proving out like the whole microfinance space way early around
Right,
2012.
right, right.
And people now it's become a mainstream investment. People always used to think that microfinance was just like this impact theme, and if you invest in it, you will never make money. But if you see now, like a lot of folks around the world making a lot of money just around whole concept of microfinance. So I think Omidyar did a good job of kind of explaining and bringing out this whole model called like returns continuum, where you kind of are more smart about thinking. You know, how do you think about investments from something where do you do grants to kind of build an ecosystem? So like to create an internet, you need to put in a grant money so that you create an infrastructure. Once you layer that infrastructure, you bring in entrepreneurs and maybe to initially test some like really wild ideas. You might give money and most of them might not work out, some of them might be game changers. But as the ecosystem progresses, in like similarly in the case of a microfinance or energy for example, then you will
Yep.
suddenly seeing them progressing into getting into like a purely commercial era, like area where you know these companies, all you need to do is they've proven out a model, you just need to give them money where you can expect a commercial IRR and expect them to kind of scale at at large globally and kind of prove out some of the returns that investors look at. And I think having that concept and understanding, and therefore, different players can have their thesis on where they across the continuum that they want to play. But that's how at least Omidyar used to think about it, and that's I think one of the reasons why they've done fairly very very well globally in the field of impact investing, because they have been very um, pragmatic and holistic about how they think about impact investing.
Got it. So, how was your day-to-day life like when you joined the investment team at Omidyar?
It was amazing. Like one of the most humblest set of people that I've met. So I used to do a lot of calls with everyone within the team to learn from them. Work with the global team to learn a ton from them. But I think 40% of my time generally used to go to meet like the best entrepreneurs across globally and in India and learn from them. In general, I don't think I had a lot to contribute, only to learn from these amazing entrepreneurs and how they're tackling very complex problems on both commercial or grant making size aside in like a very interesting way. And then like 20-30% of your time used to be kind of putting them through an investment process, getting them approval, making sure they're doing well, managing the portfolio governance in any possible way. And the 20% time was kind of making sure that their learnings you're putting out and disseminating that in the ecosystem, talking to people, learning from others in the ecosystem, and kind of sharing in any possible way your learnings, or kind of bringing other learnings and best practices in the internal organization. So I would say that's how like most of my time used to go.
Nice, nice. Was it a change? Was it difficult initially? Because I believe in VCs you also have to source these startups to invest in. Was that a part of your job description? Like, and how was it like for you?
Yeah, like I think in general Omidyar roles are pretty entrepreneurial. So it's not like my only job was to source. I think the job was to work in like creating a deal or like sourcing a deal and then taking it end to end to an investment and being one of the sponsors. So like the good part about Omidyar in general that I've seen is that if like a junior person or a senior person, irrespective who it is, has a comment and doesn't like a deal or likes a deal, there will be a thorough discussion on it. And so there have been a lot of deals where a senior proposed person has proposed something and I have expressed my deep reservations on why I don't think this will work. And if I'm logical and like it makes sense, people will hear out and will not go ahead with the deal. And there've been deals where people have allowed to run me with an investment single-handedly,
Okay,
the process, and kind of just mentored and supported me on the way. I think that way it was fairly nice in terms of change. I think the only change that you broadly see is in how you function. Like when I was in ITC, these are like large groups that you work with. Every day in a headquarter, I used to see like 300, 400 people in the headquarter. And like Omidyar, Bangalore office, when I was there, was like 10 member or 8 members, if I'm not wrong.
hmm.
I think suddenly you're used to working in smaller teams. It's a more individual job, and then like you work in a group of 2 or 3 people as you kind of take an investment forward and all of that. So I think your working modalities change a lot, and also your style of functioning in a way that in operations, if you miss on a certain deadline, like something if it's urgent needs to be done now, because like if I don't produce, there is a large scale big like bullwhip effect across the whole supply chain. Whereas in investing, you need to learn patience and kind of see things brew a little, because it's not like if I don't take an investment decision today, like just sleep over it for tomorrow, things will like change a lot until unless like it's a deal that is being chased after and all of that. So I think some of those tactical changes definitely need to be made. Otherwise, I think the basic ethics of work remain the same.
Got it. Got it. Well, I just noticed that you've been really describing this whole role in Omidyar has been like very enriching for you. So I wonder what made you sort of think about an MBA? Why did you sort of go and apply?
So I was very happy at the Omidyar job. I don't think I was applying for a business school at all. I think again my mentor at Omidyar played a very important role in kind of, and that's one thing that I realized. Like no good firm will be like, hey, you are a good performing employee. They'll be like, stay back and all of that. Don't go. But I think like my one of these mentors, took me out for like 3 lunches or dinners and was like, just trying to explain me the process of why they think an MBA broadly, would be helpful in kind of further having me think in a much more global way and have much more global ambitions in what I can do. I think having born in India, lived in an Indian ecosystem, we are kind of somewhere sensitized and normalized to just think about, thinking our scale is India in a
Hmm.
certain way, or maybe like Southeast Asia. If people say I have global ambitions, they generally look with suspicion or people laugh on them. And I think one of the things, given like my mentor was Harvard educated and all of that, his point of view was that some of these educations did bring a lot of change in how he perceived things and like the confidence that you get and how even people perceive you. So I think he genuinely believed that it will be um, a very useful tool in my repertoire to help me grow as a person and also kind of have me think more ambitiously about what are the other ways that I can leverage my knowledge, skill, tools to kind of drive things in a further way. Like, for example, one of the things he was like, why don't you think about, you know, being a fund owner at the age of 33 or 34? Like, don't
Right.
caught into the whole ecosystem of like, hey, I want to become a principal, a director, a partner. Like, why can't you be ambitious? Like, there are people at the age of 34 who've done that. So, like, why don't you go to people who've raised funds, talk to them what it takes to raise a fund? And so, like, his idea was to push my thinking and my envelope, and therefore, in that process, make me realize that why an MBA might be a great step, next step. And and he was like, you can always come back whenever you want to, but like in my interest, he would definitely recommend an MBA. So that's one of the reasons, and thankfully he recommended that I've kind of applied, and how it happened and all of that. Like,
Apoorva, I think you're really humble. You always mentioned that how, your transition from ITC to Midya was luck. Again, getting into ITC was also luck. Getting promoted is also luck. I don't think people can get lucky so many times. I think you're generally a very brilliant, smart, driven chap. I think the only time you sort of got lucky was actually with your mentors, the sort of mentors you got in your life and how they sort of shaped your career. As you've described him, how he sort of shaped your thinking about why you should go for an MBA. And there were some really valid reasons, you've brought out. So I now I'm going to move on to a bit of a controversial question. In Harvard, what sort of profiles get admitted from India? Are they bankers, consultants, private equity folks, entrepreneurs? Who are they, and what is the split between them, in your opinion?
so I don't have like a formal statistical number, but I can kind of give you an anecdotal understanding of at least my batch, or like one batch before that I have seen. I would say what we had in our batch around 35 to 40 people with Indian passports, and there would be more
Okay,
people who are of Indian origin or have US passports but have spent most of their time in India and all of that. There will be some more of the numbers. So assume a 10% or 20% number here and there, but
yeah,
approximately in that 40 range. And I would say there would be people, 20% of that batch that I saw in my year was people who were either ex consultants or were in finance in some way or the other. So I would classify finance as uh, banking, private equity, venture capital, impact investing. Uh, so 20-30% people from there, 20, 25% people were like pure consultants, like,
okay,
people who have, done consulting, basically taken a sabbatical somewhere else and then come back. 20-30% people will be from operational backgrounds, so like people from Abbott, people from Davita, some of these operational roles,
Right.
and 10-15% people, from a not-for-profit background, or for example, from working on very interesting problem sets like, energy, being an ex-entrepreneur, or somebody who has been like, owns an ex-family business or have been in politics, or worked on policy issues, and so like very interesting profile. So that's how at least I saw the split roughly in my
Hmm.
batch around Harvard.
Got it. So I see a lot of private equity and consulting folks make up almost, I think, 50% of the class,
It's
which
like
is a pretty
35-40% people. I might be off on the number. It might be 30-25%, but at
hmm.
some point in time had consulting in their background.
Would you happen to know which of these funds, private equity funds or banks, would Indian folks generally come from, which are considered sort of feeder to Harvard?
I've seen a lot of private equity firms being represented. Uh, you know, there are definitely people. Some are like standard names. Obviously like likes of a Sequoia, Axel. On the venture side, Lightspeed. There is Warburg, Baincap, Blackstone, GA. There would be there would be Kedar. So I think there are people. There are people True North. So there are people like across the board that you will find. IDG, um, uh, Aspada, Omidyar, this kind of Best Bridge. So yeah, there are people across the board, across the firms that I've seen, uh, getting admitted. Different years, there are different institutes.
Got it. So I'm just forming my own perspective here that people get in from a Sequoia as well, and also from say a Kedara, or I would say, as you mentioned, Westbridge, who are also Indian funds. So I believe people equally stand a chance if a fund is of, I would say, certain repute and they've done some great work and it's been recognized, I believe, and the work has been
I think my
great.
perspective, in my perspective, is fairly simple. Is I think in the whole MBA process, people over-index on profile. Uh, I'm not saying and discounting that you know in the process these names don't help. It obviously helps to signal a certain amount of success that you have had in your life in the past. Uh, Conventional success, I would say, I don't necessarily. Uh, there are other ways you can be successful, but like how people perceive conventional success.
Right.
But that's one part of it. But I've seen a lot of people in my batch across where somebody externally who wants to take a guess on like is it a Harvard profile might say, oh, it's not a one. And I think that's where I think I find it wrong is like people over index in profile, but application process in general for Harvard is such a cohesive, comprehensive package that you would have your essays, so story that you're narrating. Some people have really powerful narrative stories, where
Right.
they might not on paper have like, they might have like five failures, but that five failures perhaps, for example, can feed into something really powerful on what and where they want to do. Also, there are also in like a lot of these institutes socioeconomic inequities which play a role in whether you can actually break into a Sequoia or a Blackstone or a Baincap or a Warburg, for example, because you need to have that tuition money to get into an IIT, or you need to be English speaking to be breaking into it. So like a lot of these inequities feed into it, and I think Harvard for a long time has started kind of feeding and considering those feedbacks and also acknowledging some of those stories and kind of giving them the platform to come up and kind of leverage that platform to do good for for various causes there. So like you would meet a lot of my batchmates and most of them would like talk a lot of them would talk about that when they had applied, like they were planning not to apply because they thought they'll not get
Hmm.
in, like self censor themselves because they think their profile is not good. But like they were surprised when they got in, and it's actually a lot of people who actually say that in general, and that's the truth. Is people just think that there's some mystical figures who get into Harvard, but it's just a lot of people can get in and have like really amazing profiles. All they need to do is just think comprehensively about the package and don't censor themselves just because they think they don't have the conventional profile for Harvard.
Got it. Got it. Also, here, I since you'd mentioned about getting in, not having one of those uh, profiles which people think are sort of feeder profiles. I wonder, say someone who's done great in operations or maybe consulting, uh, is it, can they sort of make that shift to say private equity, venture capital, post MBA, or do you require a pre-MBA experience in VC or private equity to tap into those opportunities for the post MBA associate roles?
It helps. Having a prior background always helps in your next job, that you can, you can confidently tap the table and say that, hey, I've done this before. I know what I'm getting into. And you're also better prepared for your interview in general because you've done that. You have a better sense of the ecosystem, have better connections, and better stories to tell.
Right.
And it helps. But it's not like people who don't have it don't get in. I know a ton of people, at least from Indian backgrounds, who have pure operational backgrounds, got it back from Harvard into venture capital. I haven't seen a
Okay.
ton of people break into private equity because the roles are very fewer, and there are a ton of people who already come from that background, so it gets more competitive. But it doesn't mean that you cannot, especially like I know a lot of like doctors who get into hedge funds and um,
Wow.
like healthcare investing, for example, because those are specialized investing roles. So if people, I think the way I think about it is people should be clear when if they are looking to make that transition, and that's not I would not say like a convention and an easy transition. You just need to be more focused and more prepared. You can't come in with be like, hey, I have done operations. I will just work 15 days on my resume and cover letter and apply to a private equity fund and expect them to
Hmm.
interview you and talk to you and perhaps let you join in general, because these will become competitive roles. So like you will have to take the extra effort, put in like the extra 50-60% effort from an average candidate to kind of shine out. That can be through like putting in theses, or like being active in your outreach, like actually having people recommend you or show something which is an edge that others don't bring on the table. But there has to be an active work and a consolid like continuous persistent effort towards kind of making that shift in general.
Got it. You see, a lot of people when I sort of talk to them, a lot of folks are like, "Hey, एक बार Harvard घुस गए तो life बन गई." But as you had mentioned, it's not easy at all. Like once you go there, people will be equally competitive. The best of the best go there, and like getting a job, that sort of a stature, like so for private equity, venture capital, it's not going to be easy, as you mentioned. The background really feeds into it. Of course, you can make that transition with I believe the electives and the courses you take up, the activities you take up, societies you end up joining, internships you do. But of course, it's still an uphill battle. It's only the start when you get to Harvard, and there's so much to be achieved inside Harvard to tap into those opportunities to the fullest. And since
No, I was saying was I think you rightly pointed out. I think one of the biggest mistakes I've seen a lot of people do is I think MBA becomes their end goal. I get a lot of people who reach out to me and like कि अगर मैं not for profit कर लूँ तो मैं हार्वर्ड चला जाऊँगा क्या? And like and so like in general I think the idea is MBA has become an end goal, whereas it's not like
hmm,
Harvard चले गए तो life successful, and that's not true for any school in general. Like they are just tools to help you kind of perhaps make you grow you into a better person and do well. But it's not like every person out of Harvard is successful and every person who's not out of Harvard is not successful. There are a ton of people who are super successful and are not Harvard graduates, perhaps much more than Harvard graduates in general. So I think at the end, this is like a 40-50 year journey where your hard work, your efforts, and your dedication makes a lot more difference to where you are professionally than a Harvard MBA tag. So like it's very important that people understand that this is just start of a journey and not their end goal.
you rightly pointed out, like people say ki NPO kar lo. I was told do the Teach for India, you will get into Stanford. And it doesn't make sense because I don't see myself say at today, working in the NPO space. Like say I want to be somewhere else in consulting, investment banking. It doesn't make sense to be there. So again, like getting in again, you have to still work hard, and there's no guarantee. You spend so much money there going there. So it's like a again, it's like a shop, but you to like even go to that shop and buy that service of the MBA, be prepared what you're getting into before getting in, and then be disappointed with it. And since I think somewhere I mentioned, since the best of the best go to Harvard, and I'm sure they are pretty clear what they want out of their MBA. I was actually wondering. It's more of a gossipy question. Have you did you meet any legacy students there, whose parents were influential, powerful, who got in through sort of that sort of profile? What were they like? What was your experience with them if you hadn't ever interacted with them, cross paths with them?
I had a ton of kids who come. So legacy in Harvard terms typically mean people whose parents were also ex-Harvard graduates. But there are a ton of legacy kids, and there are also a lot of people who come from influential heritage.
Right,
If in general, like like it will be pretty surprising. But honestly, a lot of them are like super hardworking. There will always be people, you know, who might or might not fit into like what you would think, is what a person should be doing. But there are a ton of kids that who are super hardworking, who are extremely sincere about their ambitions. They understand the privilege that they come from and kind of are accepting of it, and in a way put in a lot of effort and are super respectful and are super helpful in general, um, in kind of helping others in any possible way that they can. So in general, the perception we have in India is कि अरे rich है तो मेहनत नहीं करता, but it's like super nice and refreshing, and very encouraging to see a lot of extremely uh, you know influential people of privilege come and like put in equally as much of efforts that they can to kind of continue building on that success that their parents had and kind of doing much more. So like a lot of kids I know whose parents were huge hedge fund managers and all of that, but they're like working equally
uh-huh.
hard, staying with us in the same kind of dorms. They have the ambitions of starting their own hedge funds, for example. So they're putting in that hard work and everything, and are also cognizant of their privilege there. So there will be, few outliers, but a large part of people that I met were like really good.
Very interesting. This is the sort of question I was really looking for. This is the beginning of the podcast about what these people. Uh, I just had sort of this question about your future plans, Apoorv. If you can, this is my final question to you. I'm so sorry for keeping you waiting and dragging this podcast. So, what are your future plans, post MBA? Because I believe now you've completed your MBA and you'll be joining Inside Partners. What is this new role about? What are you looking for in this role, and how does it work out for you going forward?
Hmm. So my new roles. One of the reasons I thought MBA was pretty helpful for me was I wanted to transition from early stage investing into I think having the landscape of having backing best assets across a value chain and just not being you know chained to being you can only do a series A or a seed or a series B, and different funds have different constraints uh, uh, around that. And so I wanted to be basically in a job where I have a chance to kind of back companies across the value chain, and also have a chance to kind of look at amazing entrepreneurs in India, Southeast Asia, but also kind of have a chance to look at some US deals, learn from like the best of the best people around there, and kind of you know amalgate those cross border learnings and kind of be a better investor. And therefore I thought Insight, was fitting into that right sweet spot for me. In general, that it's been one of the very well performing funds on the tech side, have done fairly well for themselves, have backed amazing companies like a Shopify or a Monday.com, for example, or a Twitter. And I think I was definitely they have had what seven investments in India which are announced, and a lot of them are like doing really really well.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so I was like, why not be more thematic and help them kind of scale the franchise in India in a much more structured way, and kind of pursue some of those amazing set of deals across sectors and across stages. especially as like the ecosystem has started to mature. And there are also ton of businesses which are being made in India, but for the world, where like I think Insight can further have like a great value add in general, just because of like the US learnings that they bring and help these businesses also scale globally in US or Western European markets or Asia Pacific markets in any way. So I thought like having sitting at that like bridge between global and India, and therefore having the ability to kind of invest better in India, as well as kind of invest in back startups who can kind of capture and do amazingly on the global stage. Were two driving factors that I ended up choosing Insight, and kind of grateful that they gave me this opportunity and kind of work across the value chain to back amazing entrepreneurs and learn from them. So yes, I'm most excited about is just learning and meeting amazing entrepreneurs across stages and learning from them and hoping to become a better investor.
Nice. And since you will be one of the founding team members of that, I believe, I think the India ventures, will you be operating out of US, or at some point you have any ambitions of coming back and working from here, or how does it work out?
Yeah. No, so I don't think it's like a separate. It's like one common fund, and like the idea is to kind of cover India in a more holistic way, uh, which would be part of my job. So I would be starting in New York, and hopefully making long trips to India, but very soon, hoping to relocate to India.
Got it. Apoorv, thank you so much for doing the podcast. It was fun.
Thank you so much, Asim. Really enjoyed this.